Oh, hello. Welcome in. It's Sunday. It's about 7 o'clock. And yes, I've already started drinking because that game was brutal. The Saints lost to the Bucs 20-10. I was on the sideline for it. Steve got to hang out on the couch and watch the game for once. But that was a rough game. We're gonna get into a lot of it.
I was thankful to be on the couch this week.
Yeah, right. That was not a game you had to be at. I felt bad for everyone that was there because they were all just so hyped up. They were ready to, that place was ready to pop. And they just never got a moment, right? There was never a moment where you got excited. There were a few good defensive plays, but man, that was rough. Anyway, this is Inside Black and Gold. This is the raw version of the podcast. It's going to post tomorrow morning. This is kind of a reaction pod. We're going to go through studs and duds. We're going to go through, the players who stood out, the players who we thought did not stand out. We're going to just kind of react. We have a lot of sound from the post game. We have Jameis not answering questions about his back. We have Mike Thomas calling Mike Evans a bitch, essentially. This is live on YouTube, but that's fine. Hey, we're live on Facebook too. So anyway, like I said, it hasn't been a great day. So I get one curse out of the way. But yeah.
That's allowed online. Sure. We're not on
no FCC. You can't come get me
here.
And it's true. I mean, that is the best way to describe what Mike T said about Mike Evans, which was like, that's not tough. Like, what you're doing is not cool. I know you think that is the case. It's not. But we'll get into that.
And it's also not the first time it's happened.
Yeah, well, that's what Mark Ingram said. It's like, yeah, you cheap shot at him once already. You did it again. Like we don't need to do this every time. Like, like if you didn't get eaten alive in all those matchups, you could say, okay, right? Like when Odell Beckham and Josh Norman were getting into it, you could say, yeah, Josh is being a punk because Odell Beckham is eating him alive. In this case, Mike is being a punk because Marshawn is clowning him at every turn and he can't win in the game. And so that's how he decides to try to win. It's the Adam Sandler's like, this is how I win, That's how Mike Evans is trying to win by as Mark Ingram put it, ear-holing a guy. But yeah, we'll get into that. So Steve, do you want to kind of lead us into the actual podcast and then we'll kind of just get going here?
Sure. We ready to do that?
Yeah, go for it.
Week 2 in the books, Who Dat Nation. We are inside Black and Gold on a sad post game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, in which the Black and Gold lost 20-10. I'm Steve Geller along with Jeff Nowak, and we are here to bring you the latest from the game, giving you also reaction post game from players. You'll hear from Jameis Winston, Mike Evans. Yeah, we did get some audio from him. Along with Mark Ingram, Michael Thomas, and we'll give you some of our thoughts on some studs and duds from the game, guys who had a decent performance and others who did not live up to expectations. Jeff, how was your go on the sideline?
Yes, I got to watch this one on the sideline. Steve made sure to give me the bad game to go to. Although, all of the Saints home games, like there was a time, and I remember it, that going to the Superdome was a death sentence for an opposing team, right?
True.
I remember even when I didn't live here, before I moved here and started covering this team, there was this reputation that going to the Superdome was not going to be a good day for you. You were not going to leave happy. You were going to leave battered and bruised and with a loss. And that just hasn't been the case the last several years. And, you could say it's because Drew is gone. I don't know, but, it's been brutal to watch these games in the Superdome. Last year you had they beat the Bucs last year on Halloween, and that was like one of the top moments. Now it's like you lose to the Giants, you lose to the Dolphins, you lose to the Falcons. It's just, you got to find a way to protect your home turf because this is a team that's been so good away from home that you can be, if you could just hold serve at home, you would be a dominant football team based on the results. But, being on the sideline for a game, it's the first time I've ever watched an NFL game from field level. I know Murtis said she was listening. She had some nice things to say. Let's see. Oh, there it is. Yeah. I was Joe Money on the spot. That's what I like to hear. And it was a good time. It took a little while to get used to it. It's really loud down there. Everything's happening really fast. You can't, it took me a while to figure out kind of where I needed to be positioned. Because I found that, whichever way the play was going, I like to be at kind of that corner cutout so I could get as close to the field as possible, at the edge of the players. Because when I'm behind the players, if I'm not trying to get a note about a specific player, I can't see anything. The only way I can watch the game is on the screen. So
did you ever have a moment where you almost became part of the play?
No, not really. There was a couple in the end zone that got close. A ball almost hit me because that's what the game was a lot of balls missing receivers and bouncing.
Ouch.
But no, there was no plays that kind of finished by me. Although I got a really good look at both the Mark Ingram fumble and the Mike Thomas touchdown, because I was at the back of the end zone for both of them, and those were probably the most visually striking things that I can take out of that game, because they happened so close to me and they were both, it's so intense. I was talking to Jeff Duncan from NOLA.com, on the way back up to the press box, and he made a good point, which is when you watch the game up close, you come away being like, it's amazing that these guys don't walk away from every play with an injury.
Right.
Because the speed and the power with which they hit each other is insane. I am not that drunk. This is my first drink of bourbon, and I've taken 2 sips out of it. But, it's been a long day. This day started at 8 a.m. So keep that in mind as you say, oh, I'm hammered. No, I am exhausted. But that's fine. We're going to record this podcast and we're going to get going. And, so Steve, what was kind of your takeaway? Because I still have to rewatch the game to kind of get a better idea of how it kind of looked. But what was your kind of takeaways from watching the game at home?
The definite big concern was with Jameis Winston. You just felt like he was never comfortable after that first drive. Things were going so well to start the game, I thought. And sadly, they only finished with that field goal, but it looked like there was a big day ahead, that the Saints were moving the ball down the field. Everything seemed to be clicking well, but there were more than one occasion where it looked like Jameis Winston could have ran for a first down and kind of held up or threw the ball. And you just have to wonder, was that his back injury lingering in his head? And I totally get it if that's the case, because, reports are that he's dealing with a number of issues in the back area. It's not just one sole thing that's wrong with it. I don't know how much we're going to get from the Saints though on it, because Jameis Winston certainly didn't give us any clues.
Yeah, it was reported before the game that it was multiple fractures in his back.
And even Dennis Allen wouldn't talk about that either.
No, he said he had a back issue. That's about all he would say. And it's I'm not a doctor. I don't know. But if anytime you hear fractures in anything, it's hard to believe that it's not something that will affect you in some capacity. How much it's affecting him, I don't know. But it's hard to believe that you can take a shot to the back in an NFL game,
yes,
and not get up and be like, oh, crap, my back really hurts right now. And it's it's not like, oh, you have to come out of the game, but does that affect you on the next throw, right? Are you able to release the ball the right way and get it on target? That's the question I have, because he was way more inaccurate than, Jameis is not the most accurate passer in the world. You kind of accept that. He has a really good deep ball. He has a cannon for an arm, but he is not always the most accurate quarterback. He was off a lot today, especially down the field. And I think that's where if you were having issues, that would be it, with kind of that just kinetic motion and getting the ball released where you needed to. But the frustrating thing to me is not that, you have these questions about his back. It's that Jameis was asked 3 separate times in his press conference, okay, how was your back? Was it affecting you? And this is basically what he said every time.
How is your back affecting play today? What could it affect going forward?
Yeah, what's really important is protecting the football. I have to do a better job of doing that to give ourselves a chance to win the game.
With that injury, though,
yeah, everyone in that locker room is playing with some type of banged up or something. But like I said, what's important is offensively, I have to do a better job of executing on third downs, and I can't give him the football.
It's almost like he's programmed to say it. He's like a robot.
I mean, like, just say your back hurts. Like, I don't what are you? We agree that you need to do a better job protecting the football, but that's not the question you were asked, Jameis. Answer the question. But I think he just doesn't want the story to be about his back, but unfortunately, it's going to be the story, right? You don't lose a game like that. You don't struggle to move the ball the entire game and not have questions about whether your fractured back. This isn't like a pulled muscle. This is like a serious thing. You don't get to just evade that question, right? And it's going to continue. Hopefully next week he goes out and shows, you know what, this was a 1 week thing. I needed to get used to it. It's going to keep getting better. But I mean, it's impossible to look past. You threw 3 interceptions today. Anytime you see Jameis have a rough day like this where he throws interceptions, you're going to get, it's Jameis, blah, blah, blah. In this case, I think the biggest issue was that he was being overprotective of the ball and he wasn't pushing the ball where he needed to go. And then later in the game when you didn't have a choice, that's when the interceptions crept in. That's when you tried to force a ball to, the first interception I think was I'll rank the interceptions. One, the second one, which he tried to force to Jarvis Landry, was the worst of the interceptions because it was an interception based on the throw. Like
that was the pick 6, right?
Yes. It was a pick 6. It was a ball that should not have been thrown. It was not dissimilar from the kind of the sketchy ball he threw against the Falcons that didn't get intercepted but had a chance to be. And that was the worst of the interceptions because it was a bad read. It did not have to happen. The second one was the one to Chris Olave that he threw, that he underthrew it. And it was only a bad interception. Like, it's not bad to give your guy a chance downfield. It was bad because it was the third attempted deep shot to Chris Olave, and the first 2 you overthrew, and you had a chance at. And that third one you underthrew, and Jamel Dean came down with it. And those have to be hits. You can't miss those. Like, this guy is open. And the fumble by Olave, man. At that point, it's just like,
finally, right. They finally connected, right. And then he took the ball on the turf.
Like, I remember when Eli Manning used to fumble because he fell and didn't know what to do. It's like, you don't expect that out of a wide receiver, but you can almost see it happening in slow motion. It was like he was surprised that he had it.
Right, I finally got one.
And the game wasn't over at that point, right? That was a 51-yard pass. There was a little over 2 minutes left, right? They go down and score, and they need to get an onside kick. But that does happen occasionally. It's not a great odds thing, but you would have given yourself a chance. And that ended the game effectively. But yeah. And then the other interception, I can't, my memory is eluding me on the other interception. Do you remember what it was?
I thought you mentioned all 3.
No, there's a third one. It's not a big deal, but that one was the least egregious just because it was a good play. It was a fine read. It just didn't go the way you wanted it to. Let's see. Yeah, it was the one that was just throwing to Juwan Johnson, and it was just like you're down points, you're trying to make a play, and it didn't work. It was similar to the interceptions Drew threw in the playoff matchup. This game went very similarly to the matchup in the playoffs a few years ago, right? Everything seems, the defense is playing well enough. You are in position to take control of the game. Then all of a sudden, a fumble that takes away points changes everything. And then you're playing from behind, and the quarterback is throwing interceptions because he's trying to make something happen. And all of a sudden, you're losing the turnover battle 5-0 or 5-1, and it's not that close. It was also a 10-point loss, which I think it was 30-20 in the playoffs. This was 20-10. Jameis threw 3 interceptions in this game. Drew threw 3 interceptions in that game. Mark Ingram fumbled in this one. Jared Cook fumbled in that one. So, yeah, very similar. And the way you lost is very similar, where the defense did what it does. It dominated. The defense dominated Tom Brady. It was a 3-3 game going into the fourth quarter. I've had people come at me on Twitter and say, like, oh, this was a blowout. No, it was 3-3 going into the fourth quarter.
Which is surprising too, where you mentioned in the defense played so well, but they only registered 1 sack the entire game. And what's crazy is you look at it now through 2 games, the Saints defense has 1 sack. Meanwhile, Jameis Winston has been sacked 10 times. I didn't see this coming from this defense we've been touting so much in the offseason, but there were concerns in the preseason. I was worried about the amount of pressure that was not coming from the front four and wasn't being generated anywhere. I don't know what's going on with the Saints defensive ends, and it was really surprising to see a guy like Peyton Turner being inactive today.
Well, I agree with that. It is disappointing to see your first round pick from last year inactive when he's not, because when I tweeted that this morning, everyone's like, "Oh, he's hurt already." He's not hurt.
No,
he's not dealing with an injury. He wasn't on the injury report at all. He just wasn't active. And last week that was Tano Passanio was inactive. And I think you do have one too many pass rushers. So someone has to be inactive. But you'd hope that wouldn't be your first round pick from last year, who's the odd man out, but he has been, or he was this week. And it's weird because he did make a play last week, right? He blocked a punt. You'd think like having a role on special teams would keep you on the active roster, but no. But I'm not as worked up about the lack of sacks at this point, just because it's a weird thing where the first week, yes, you weren't able to get to Mariota, but there's a reason you weren't able to get to Mariota, which is he's never in the pocket, right? You can only get a sack if the guy's in the pocket. If he's outside the pocket, it's not a sack, right? If he's running, it's not a sack. So it's, because they did tackle him for losses in that game. They just didn't get credited for a sack. In this game, and Cam Jordan brought this up, Tom was getting the ball out so fast that he was essentially torpedoing his own drives. Like, he was getting the ball out so fast that his team did not even have a chance to get to the first down marker. And it's like, sure, you didn't get a sack, but that's why you weren't able to get a lot of pressure, because he knew that he couldn't stand back there. So he was just getting it out hot every time. And that's what Tom Brady does really well. Tom Brady is very good at that. And it's frustrating as a defensive line group. But I don't think, when you look at the defensive effort that was put out by the Saints today, the lack of sacks isn't what lost them this game, right?
No, it wasn't the defense either.
No, I mean, so it was 3-3 going into the fourth quarter. And the defense got Tom Brady off the field. They were set up to punt, and it was special teams that had a 12-man on the field penalty that set up that drive for a touchdown. The only successful drive of the day, which was extended by a bunch of other penalties. And that was the only drive of the day that the Bucs really got anything done. They had one other drive where they got into the red zone and then fumbled. But so I'm not going to say that I'm super concerned about the defense when they dominated. The Saints defense dominated that game, and they lost it because the offense could not sustain a drive and not turn it over throughout that game. I think you could have won that game 6-3. I think there is a universe where Mark Ingram doesn't fumble, you settle for a field goal, and then the Saints just clamp the rest of that game, and it's 6-3. Because you went into the fourth quarter tied 3-3. The defense was that dominant, and you did not give them a chance to win the game. It's the exact opposite of how you won games at the end of last season, which is you didn't turn the ball over. You played smart on offense. You made them have to go the long road and beat your defense, and you won games down the stretch. You won 9-0, right? You won this exact game in week 15 of last year by not turning it over. And that's what you were unable to do today.
Yeah, I was thinking too that the fourth quarter this week was the complete opposite also of week one in Atlanta, where obviously, the team was able to come together, rally, and put things together for a major win. And this one, everything that offense did in the fourth quarter just went to pieces pretty much, except for that, I guess, one saving grace touchdown to Michael Thomas there at the end of the game.
Yeah, it was a nice touchdown. I will say that it was he was covered. He was double covered, and the ball ended up, there was maybe like a foot diameter window that you could have fit that ball into. Like if you're throwing at the target in practice and you're just trying to just chuck it into that tiny little window. That's what he had to do on that touchdown, and he did it. It was a terrible decision to try to throw the ball there, but whenever you're throwing to Mike Thomas, a terrible decision is kind of like a decent decision because he can make you look good, and that's what he did there. And so yeah, that was like the one positive moment. And to be fair to Jameis, he also did lay a dime out to Chris Olave late in the game for a 51-yard gain that Chris fumbled away. So he gets a little credit for that, I suppose, right? You got to give him credit for that throw, but he missed him too many times early in the game for me to feel super excited about that.
Right. I was going to say the other misses earlier kind of, I don't want to even say even out. There were still more misses than obviously what happened with Olave, but Olave did cough the ball up. So that's a big negative, obviously.
There were a couple calls in that game that really bugged me.
I think on both sides.
Yeah. So the Marshawn Mike Evans one, we can get into that more. But that's kind of obvious. Like at a certain point, you just have to throw two people out, right? You have to throw the two people out that were involved in the altercation, and that's what they did. It's malarkey because you're not actually penalizing the people who committed the infractions. You're penalizing the guy who was targeted. But you understand why you end up there. The penalty that I think was awful, the worst call of that game.
Oh, I know where you're going.
Unnecessary roughness on Bradley Roby as Cameron Brate, a tight end, is barreling to the edge of the field, going to get a first down. And I don't think he even hit him. He just came through with a shoulder.
Right.
And I mean, that's a 15-yard penalty on a play you would have been off the field. Like, that's awful. And here's what Tyrann Mathieu had to say about that after the game.
I mean, I don't know, man. It's tough to play defense in this league sometimes. But I thought Roby was just being him, trying to make a physical, aggressive play. It's 3rd and 9. Obviously, the tight end caught the ball. As he get closer to the sticks, the harder we run, as a defender. And so I just thought Roby was just showing his effort, just trying to stop him from getting to the chain.
It was one of the worst calls I've seen in a long time. Because it's like you're just playing football. It was similar to that call in the Titans game last year where I think it might have been Bond. Who was it? Warner? I don't know. But he got called for unnecessary roughness on Ryan Tannehill for hitting him in the back, like with his hands. And it's like, guys, it's already impossible to play defense in this league. You can't penalize people for things that are objectively not penalties. Like hitting is required in the game of football. You have to be able to hit guys, and this guy, it's a tight end. It's not like this is a defensive lineman coming after a quarterback. I thought that was just egregious.
I don't know what it is about coming to the Superdome and why all of a sudden referees, everything turns into amateur hour.
It was brutal. And, I don't think this referee group was that bad in terms of like some of the assessments they made on the field, right? But they were very flag happy. And in a game where the defense is dominating, the flags that didn't need to be thrown made way too much of an impact on this game. All that said, that play doesn't happen if you can count to 11, right? Because that penalty came on the drive that was extended by the fact that you couldn't get 11 people on the field. So, you gotta, it's a give and take, but yeah, that was rough. And it doesn't overstate the fact that you lost that game because you turned it over 5 times. In a game that went to the fourth quarter 3-3, and the turnover battle was tied 1 apiece. You turned the ball over 4 times in the fourth quarter. You don't win a game. I don't think it's possible to win a game like that.
And I will say, I think there were maybe 2-3 plays that went against the Buccaneers that were questionable too. So I thought all around that the referees had a not so great day, and it wasn't just geared towards the Saints kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, you're in a tough spot when there's a brawl that breaks out on the field, and that's not the refs. Like, let's be clear, the refs on the field are not the ones that threw out Marshawn and Mike Evans. That is a call that gets made in New York. So, you can say that that's kind of a Bush League way to adjudicate that situation. Mike Evans came off the bench, which should be an automatic ejection, and went after Marshawn, who was just, I would argue, defending himself. Sure, he might have instigated things beforehand, but that's not what he was being penalized for in that moment. He was getting penalized for defending himself against a guy who, as Mark Ingram put it, earholed him.
What's crazy too is nothing happened to Leonard Fournette.
Yeah. Right. You would think the guy who instigated a bench clearing brawl would have some sort of penalty, but no, he's a New Orleans kid. They had to take it easy on him.
He skated by, right?
But yeah, so there was one other clip I wanted to play, and that is the Mike Evans post game. And I have not heard this. This is one that Steve found and loaded into our audio stream. So I'm hearing it for the first time with y'all.
Tom, I just was trying to have my teammates back. All I seen them punch somebody in the face. Like, I ain't gonna let that happen.
You said you never want to hurt your team, right? But these
Yeah.
guys responded to what happened, right?
Yeah. We got each other's back. We've been together for a while now. We got each other's back. We know when we come to New Orleans, it gets spicy. So
It gets spicy.
Bullshit.
Yeah, who did Lattimore punch in the face?
Nobody. I mean, like Leonard came to him and started pushing him, and he's pushing him back, and he was kind of going at it with Brady, but that's not, as far as I know, talking to the opposing quarterback is not threatening. And Mike, I mean, he came off the bench full sprint, like, and okay, if this was the first time that you had cheap shot at a guy from the sideline, fine, but it's not. This is a pattern here, and I would be very disappointed in the NFL, which, that doesn't mean it's going to matter, but I would be very disappointed in the NFL if there's not like a serious fine or a suspension for Mike. And it's not because he did anything that's like out of the reasonable error of, okay, there's a fight going on. He sprinted from the bench during a play that he was not involved in to hit somebody. Like, if that's not something that merits a suspension, I don't know what is. Like, it's not a football play, and that's the reason it got out of hand. Like, if it was just Marshawn and Leonard going at it, that's broken up in like 30 seconds. It became a brawl when Mike Evans sprinted from the sideline. And to me, that rises beyond, oh man, I'm just defending my teammate. No.
And also a lot of people pointed out too on Twitter, when did Bruce Arians become a coach again?
Yeah, I don't know. That's kind of interesting. It's like I think he's like trying to work his way back into Tom's good graces. I don't know. But yeah, that whole situation, and it was weird because on the sideline, the entire Saints bench was like in uproar, right? They were like, what the heck is going on? Marshawn was just standing there like sipping his Gatorade. And then they were like, oh, Marshawn Lattimore and Mike Evans are ejected. And he didn't even flinch. He didn't even he didn't blink. He was just like, everyone on the bench was just like, what? And he was just like, cool.
Guess I'm going to the locker room.
Yeah, this seems about right, and it's so funny because like we've spent so many years watching CJ actively try to instigate the other team, right? Actively antagonize people and trying to get them to punch him. Like that's his end goal, was to get someone to get themselves thrown out by punching him. And like Marshawn, I don't think he did anything. And I think we talked about this before coming on. It's like, even when it was Odell Beckham and Josh Norman, that's the really big one that I remember, where they were just like literally just going at each other and throwing punches throughout the entire game and didn't get ejected, neither of them. And that was the premise for why 2 personal fouls is an ejection now, because it wasn't in that game. It was the Giants and the Panthers. And like they both got called for like 3 different intentional or personal fouls. And like they were just like, this is dangerous, guys. We gotta get them out of here. But like in that matchup, Odell Beckham was torching Josh Norman. And so that's like, at that point, you're like, okay, yeah, the cornerback is just trying to get an edge by being antagonistic and being a little extra aggressive. In this situation, it's Marshawn just putting Mike Evans in jail for an entire game. And the way he's choosing to handle that is by throwing cheap shots.
Yeah, I thought it was amusing how Tampa decided to move Mike away from Lattimore's side.
They tried, and it worked early on. He kept getting matched up on Justin Evans, and they kept getting pick plays that worked. And I think the Saints reacted to that by saying, "Okay, we're gonna shadow you with Marshawn because that's been proven to work," and it did. And Mike had no impact in the second half of that game. Even before he got ejected, he had a big first quarter. But yeah, I think to claim that you were just going to defend your teammate, get out of here. That's nonsense. Because no one would have been ejected from that game if he didn't sprint onto the field and cause a bench clearing brawl.
No, and like what's crazy is, like you pointed out just before, is this isn't the first time Evans has done this, not just against the Saints, against Lattimore. And it was so long ago, that was when Jameis was still the quarterback of the Buccaneers when that incident occurred.
Well, Jameis was part of it.
Right.
So yeah, he doesn't get a pass on that either. But so here's what Mark Ingram had to say, because he was here for that. He's one of the few players that was actually on the Saints for that situation, and he was here again today.
Were you talking about Fournette or Evans earlier? Because you were around the last time this happened, right?
Evans
came off.
Evans cheap shot at him last time, and Evans cheap shot at him this time.
Yeah, we were talking about how we were surprised that Fournette. The call came from New York, but we were surprised that New York didn't see Fournette.
If anything, there was way more of them being egregious and offensive. Like, and you picked the one guy who was targeted. You know what I mean? Like, I don't see how that's fair. I don't see how any man could look at that and see somebody just cheap shot blindside you when they're really just talking. You know what I mean? They're talking, gibbering back and forth, and somebody comes and just ear holes you like blatantly. He did it twice. That was the second time he did that to Marshawn. And nobody respects that, man. But it just sucks. It's unfortunate that we lose one of our guys. And I didn't see the whole entire thing, but I definitely saw what he did, Sean.
Yeah. And
I'm actually seeing a play online too. I don't know how I missed this, where Carlton Davis basically winds up and throws a punch and nothing even gets done. Looks like he hits Michael Thomas in the end zone.
Oh, after the touchdown?
Right.
Yeah, no, that's similar to there's a clip of Cam Jordan doing in a similar situation and
trying to punch the ball out.
Yeah, in that situation, you're close enough to the end of the play that he's trying to punch the ball out. And yeah, like let's see if I can find it here.
You looking for the Carlton Davis one or Marshawn? I mean, Cam.
Well, this is the play. This is the Carlton Davis play you're talking about. That's the play
right.
You're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not – it looks worse than it is. This is the one that I was literally standing right behind. And so Mike is trying to rip the ball away and Carlton's trying to punch it out. And it's like it even looks worse because it's not a full windup. He wasn't really doing it. But, Mike is honestly trying to, like, rip out of that. So, like, he's being the more aggressive person in that moment. But no, Carlton Davis was being very, very, very handsy. And, I think that if you had one major gripe with the officiating, it was that Mike Thomas and Chris Olave did not get nearly as many defensive holding, pass interference flags as they probably earned. Because, you saw defensive holding calls on the Saints. You got if you're going to call it one way, you have to call it both ways. And Carlton Davis was the most aggressive, physical defensive back on that field. And he did not. I think the only interference call you got was that one late in the game where he literally just tripped Chris Olave intentionally. But yeah.
Yeah, the play definitely, I guess, the way it's framed and just seeing it over and over again totally looks worse than how you're describing it, for sure.
No, and there's a play from a few years back. I think it was against the Panthers and Christian McCaffrey, where Cam looks like he's punching down and trying to hit Christian McCaffrey, but it's like the ball's there. Like that's what he's trying to punch the ball out. And sure, it's after the play, which makes it look worse and out of context. It looks just like he's punching a guy, but I'm not gonna slam a guy for doing that when you'll defend a guy like Cam for what a lot of people would see out of context and be like, oh, he's a dirty player. I'm like, yeah, it's just football. But all right, let's wrap up that segment there. Again, you're listening to Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak alongside Steve Geller, and we are going through what I call the recovery podcast. This is for the Saints and Bucs. We've got about 100 people in here on YouTube watching. We've got a lot of questions I want to get to in the second half of this podcast. And we're going to start with our studs and our duds, and then we're going to get to a lot of questions. So stick around. I'm going to go to a quick break, and then we're going to get right into that. Okay, we're back. I just wanted to go through and star a bunch of questions and comments so we could get to them. I got a bunch in there, but first things first, I do want to go through our studs and our duds. So, Steve, do you want me to lead into this one? We're just going to do 2 segments
go
today,
for it.
so this will be the last segment. All right. And we're back here on Inside Black and Gold. This is our post-game Saints Bucs recovery podcast. The Bucs had 20, the Saints had 10. That means the Saints lost, and it was more painful than that because the Saints defense, in my opinion, dominated that game, and the offense was unable to take advantage. And that's the most frustrating thing is, Tom Brady didn't do anything that makes you go back and be like, wow, this is the best quarterback of all time winning a game. No, that's not what the story of this game was. He took advantage of a Saints team that couldn't do anything on offense. And so let's start with the duds. And so my first dud of the day is going to be Jameis Winston.
Womp, womp.
And it's not because I don't think he's a good quarterback. It's not because I don't think that he can lead this team to wins. It's because today, based on what I saw, either he is still a work in progress as a quarterback in this offense, or his back was affecting him more than he wants to admit. And, whether that gets better going forward, there is something you have to consider here, which is maybe a week off is going to be necessary. You have, and hear me out, because you have a long way to go until you have a bye week, right? You were talking week, 14, 13, 14?
It's definitely, I think we got 10 more weeks before we have a week off.
Right. And so if it's a question of, man, his back is just at a point where it's just going to continue to nag at him. And it's like, if you can give him a week off and get him back to 100% versus get him for whatever percentage he is right now for 4, 5, 6 more weeks, then I think you have to consider that. And you paid Andy Dalton, right? You brought Andy Dalton in for situations such as this. And I think you have to seriously consider it because, what you saw today, and granted, the Bucs are a good defense. You don't want to take anything away from them. They're very difficult to play against. They get after you as a quarterback. They play very physical on the edges. I think the Saints are still kind of coming into their own as an offense. There's been limited time on task with a lot of these wide receivers who are playing together for the first time. It's only their second game together. You didn't have Alvin Kamara, which limits what you can do offensively. But I think that as a team that understands that this is a long season and you just need to make sure you're putting your best foot forward each week, you have to consider that maybe a week off for a guy who's dealing with fractures in his back is what you might need to do. So he is my first dud of the day. His stats, let's just go through them really quick.
The big concern is like how long is a week going to help with that healing process?
Oh, I don't know, but it's something you have to think about, right? You have to kind of weigh that. It's like, will a week off help him if he can get, so like from today until 2 Sundays from now, will that be enough time to like get him back to the point that it's not affecting his throw? And that's just something you have to think about. Today, 25 for 40, 236 yards, 1 touchdown in not completely garbage time, but pretty close to it, right?
Yeah.
You weren't getting the full Bucs defense at that point. They were playing prevent. They were making you take time. So 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions, a 55.8 quarterback rating. And I would argue that his numbers on that line are not indicative of how the game went, because I think he was worse than that looks. Because a majority of those numbers are from the final quarter, right? The touchdown, all 3 interceptions, and a good chunk of that yardage was in the fourth quarter. So the first 3 quarters of that game, you did not see an offense that could move the ball. They ran the ball well. That's one thing that you can look at outside of that fumble by Mark Ingram. You didn't have Kamara, but you actually did move the ball well. So that's not a good sign when you are actually running well and you still can't get anything going on offense. So he is my dud, my first dud.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that at all. And it was really disappointing, I guess, to hear about the severity of this back issue, because I don't know. I mean, to me, fractures in your back area, I don't know how the man's even going out there to play football, much less, taking on a Tampa Bay pass rush. He got 6 sacks 6 times in the game, and surprisingly, I didn't notice any kind of wincing or him in any serious pain getting up. Just really impressed with how he dealt with that, but there were just too many times where I guess he was using, the arm to overcompensate because there were too many passes that he sailed on players.
No question. So this is how we'll do this. That was my dud. Now, Steve, you give us your first stud, and then we'll flip.
Definitely a stud of the game, to me, was Pete Werner. I was impressed with him, especially a guy that, man, there were so many questions I had coming into just this season because of all the time he missed with the groin injury. Had a solid outing in game 1 in Atlanta. Another great performance here against the Buccaneers. Let's see, he had 8 total tackles, 6 solo, had a pass defended, but just a guy who's been able to show off his range and looks like a huge key piece to this defense going forward.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, he has been a stud, and you need him to be a stud, and he has been one because you do not have a lot of depth at the will linebacker spot. So if you can get that, if you have him and DeMario in that spot, and again, it's important to say this team is 1-1, right? This team is 1-1.
Right.
They are 1-1 in the division,
but
right?
They could easily be 0-2. I guess that's the negative flip you could put on it.
Right, and they're not.
Right.
They played to a level where they could be 0-2, but they're not. They're 1-1. So this could be worse. These were two, week 1 against Atlanta is a tough matchup. It's a divisional matchup. I know Atlanta's not great, but they gave the Rams a run today. I don't think they ended up winning, but they came back. And I think the Falcons are a little better than we might have given them credit for. But either way, you won that game. You're 1-1. You're going to Carolina, a team that lost to the Giants and the Browns with Jacoby Brissett. So that's a game you have to win. But this was when I projected the season, when I looked and I got them to 11-6, this was a game I had them losing. So I had them going. I had them starting 4-1 and losing this game. So if take that for what it is, I think they're still on track, but you saw a lot of things in this game that make you concerned.
Sure, and I know everybody was obviously all hyped up because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers hadn't won in the regular season with Tom Brady, but come on, I mean, it was definitely a scenario where you had to think at least in the back of your head that Brady and the Bucs were due for one.
Yeah. Okay, so I have one guy who I have to call a stud, and one note I have to make first: Chris Olave had 13 targets today. That's insane. Why? I mean, and you hit him on 5 of them, and one of them was a 51-yard gain, which he fumbled. So you targeted Chris Olave 12 times for 4 completions for 29 yards. That's not great. Anyway, he's not the stud. Mike Thomas, 665 and a touchdown. He's still a guy who you need to get more out of. But the stud for me, and so here, I'm going to preface this. This is my stud, but I have 2 guys who I really want to talk about. So I'm going to talk very shortly about this guy and a little bit more about both of them. Shy Tuttle. When's the last time you saw a defensive tackle lead the team in tackles?
Yeah.
Does not happen. He had 9 tackles and a sack. The defensive tackle group was one I had questions about. And I think that, that's really positive when you can, you're going to get Malcolm Roach back eventually. Christian Ringo has been a practice squad elevation. He's looked solid. You know what you have in David Onyemata. If that group can be a strength, that's really good.
Yeah, I think that we've seen a lot of great things from Shy Tuttle during the offseason heading into this year that we were excited about. There was, some questions, and I think it was the Green Bay preseason game where he had a bit of a goof, but a guy that
Malcolm Roach.
Oh, that was Malcolm Roach. Yeah,
yeah. The
not Shy Tuttle, right?
Yeah, that was Malcolm Roach.
But yeah, with Tuttle, just a key part to this team being successful inside, and I thought him along with Onyemata were going to be key for this game, and unfortunately, Onyemata just is a guy that still hasn't been really standing out for me.
No, but yeah, I mean, you know what you have in him. Like he's consistent, and if you can get consistent play out of the guys next to him, then I feel good about it. And it's also, it's really tough to gauge defensive tackle play in real time. It's one of those things where if you ask Dennis Allen about it, he will never give you an answer right off the field because he needs to go look at tape. And
We
so
always do that, right?
I'm not going to overreact to anything I see from a defensive tackle, but when you see Shy Tuttle leading the team in tackles, that means he had a good day. But kind of moving on. So Steve, we still need your dud.
I would guess that the biggest dud is the fact that Mark Ingram, because of the fumble and where it occurred and the point in the game where it was, and it seemed to really suck the air out of a dome that was ready to explode, as you mentioned earlier. And I believe Dennis Allen even, we have a clip of him talking about how it was a big turning point in the game.
Yeah, hold on. Sorry.
It was a game changer. I think the ball's on about the 10-yard line at that point in time. We're in a good position, with how we're playing defense. That if we're able to put some points on the board, I think I think it was about a minute left to go in the third quarter when that happened, and so, I thought that was a momentum changer in the game. Yeah.
And I called that on Twitter when it happened. I said very uncharacteristic 2 weeks in a row for Mark Ingram. And I want to tell you, I got killed by a bunch of people saying, have you not been watching this Saints team? Do you not know Mark Ingram? I just never thought of or considered him a fumbler. And I think, you looked up some of the numbers even to really back that up. I was kind of surprised on how many people kind of came after him, or me, saying the fact that, this was very uncharacteristic of him.
Yeah, I mean, let's put it this way. He's in his 12th NFL season. He has fumbled 12 times in his career. So he averages one fumble a season, which is a running back, that's, considering
right, so back-to-back weeks is a huge deal.
Considering the way it happened today, right? Which is a good example of like, you can't always, I was in the end zone. I was right at the back of the end zone watching this. He had two hands on the ball. He was protecting the ball. It wasn't a situation where he was being loose with it. They just punched it out, and sometimes that happens, but he's lost 9 fumbles in his career. He has never lost more than 2 fumbles in any season. In 2 games, he has lost 2 fumbles. And the frustrating thing is, if not for that fumble, we would be talking about how Mark Ingram ran for 60 yards on 10 touches and had an excellent game filling in for Alvin Kamara. Right? We would talk about
carry, right?
Yeah, right. That's the math is easy there. It's 6 yards a carry, and he looked good, and he ran the ball well. He ran with power, and it was that one play, and that's the frustrating thing. But that does, that play changed the game. So you can't talk about how good his game was otherwise because it doesn't matter. And and I feel bad for him because you can tell he cares. This is not a guy who is just like, well, whatever. I had a good game and I had one bad play. He was emotional. I don't know how else to describe it. Like, you could tell when he was talking, like he was talking about the fumble, and I'm not going to say he was on the verge of tears, but like you could tell there was emotion there. Like he knew he let his team down.
Exactly.
And I felt for the guy because he's been in the league for 12 years. He knows what he's supposed to do. He knows his job is to come in here and not put the ball on the ground. And for whatever reason, he's just been unable to avoid it in the first 2 weeks. And it bothers him, and take that for what it is. He's still screwed up. But yeah, it's tough. And we can just segue into the first honorable mention that I have, because I thought Dwayne Washington looked really good.
Nice to see him back for sure.
He had 4. Yeah, it's his first game back since he tweaked his foot or his hamstring in that first joint practice with the Packers. He missed the rest of the preseason, and he looked like a guy who was going to get run. Like he looked like a guy who was going to be involved as a running back, and that injury kind of derailed that. And But I thought, Tony Jones only had 2 carries, right? Tony Jones was the guy who went into that you would expect to be the RB2. Dwayne Washington ran so well on that drive prior to Mark Ingram's fumble. He got the ball 4 times, ran for 18 yards. He plowed through the line. He looked great. And I don't know what the plan is for him long term, but I think that he should be the RB3 because I think that he just looks good. He looks like a guy who has pop. He looks like a guy who cares. And I'd like to see him get a chance. And I don't know if that comes at the expense of Mark Ingram. But if you're Mark Ingram and you can't, and if you put one more ball on the ground, I think you lose that job because you can't keep doing that, man. You can't.
Yeah, and I guess you got an honorary stud. I'm going to give an honorary dud out to tight end Adam Troutman, a guy that's just, I don't know. I thought you couldn't do less than last week, and yet again, he's not even targeted, doesn't even appear on the stat sheet, and I guess it's a little concerning considering, you expected more out of this guy in year 3 for sure.
Yeah, and the term dud applies because, if it's like if a bullet is a dud, it means it didn't fire. And it's what it feels like for Adam Troutman these last 2 weeks. He just has been a non-entity. You have not seen him. And, I think that that's a sign that he is just a blocking tight end in this offense. Nick Vannett was inactive again. And again, I feel like if you're looking for a blocking tight end, Nick Vannett is the better option as a blocking tight end. If you're not throwing to the guy, it does not make sense to have Nick Vannett inactive and to have Adam Troutman active, other than the fact that you spent a 3rd-round pick on him, because Nick Vannett is a better blocker. So I don't know. I don't know. But
yeah, and at this point, especially with your quarterback with, a fractured back, you need all the blocking help you can get.
Yeah, and Murda says Ingram is not a dud, maybe after another fumble. And that's what he was a dud today. Dud is a tough word, right? Because he did play well, but that fumble changed the game.
Yeah. And
you cannot be the veteran running back in that room and put the ball on the ground twice in 2 weeks. It is too impactful of a play. He got bailed out last week by Marcus May punching the ball out. If they go in and score on that drive, the Saints are probably 0-2 right now. So you could argue that, if not for Marcus May, Mark Ingram would be the chief cause for this team starting 0-2. And that's something that you did not expect to say, but it's reality, and he's got to be better. One more honorary stud for me, Alontae Taylor. When Marshawn Lattimore got ejected, he was forced into the fire. There's no Paulson Adebo, right? He had to go in there and play across from Bradley Roby, and I thought he looked excellent. He hit hard. He separated the receiver from the ball. There was a play that could have essentially ended the game on 3rd down that the Bucs went for the kill shot, and he went downfield on Brashard Perriman, and he went straight for the ball. He knocked it out. He's a guy who you don't expect to see when things go well this year, but you can see the vision there. You can see why this guy was a 2nd-round pick, because I think there's going to be a point down the road where he is a key contributor on this defense. And I thought in spot duty that he was just forced into the action. I thought he looked great.
Yeah, and even his contributions when he's on special team, the guy looks like a speeding bullet coming downfield.
He's been really good as a gunner.
Yeah, definitely really impressed with Taylor, and that was my biggest concern of him. We were talking about the previous week of a guy that could fill in the nickel role. I just didn't think he had obviously enough experience or time in the defense to be on the field, but obviously coming out today in that spot where they needed him when Lattimore was ejected, definitely, got his feet wet, looking good, and can only be more things for him ahead. More good things ahead for him in this defense.
No doubt. All right, this is Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak alongside Steve Geller. We're going to come back with a quick mailbag, and then we are going to get out of here and start thinking about next week, because this week has been miserable. Stick around.
Ooh.
All right, let's just go right into it. We don't need to break. All right. First question. Back here on Inside Black and Gold. First question in our live mailbag after Saints Bucs. This one's from Doug. Just Doug, no last name. Panthers are 0-2, right? Yes. The Panthers are 0-2. The Falcons are 0-2. The Saints are 1-1 and the Bucs are 2-0. The sky is not falling.
Not yet, right?
1-1, I think, is reasonable. It would be unreasonable if they're 0-2. And the reason it feels worse than it is because you know how close they were to being 0-2. But as the great Dom Toretto once told us, doesn't matter if you win by an inch or a mile, it just matters if you win. And so we don't have to look back at that Falcons game and say they played like bad, like crap through 3 quarters. All that matters is it's a win. And now this week, it's a loss. And next week, you have to find a way to show up and play at your peak level. And I genuinely think you have to, I don't think that Andy Dalton gives you the best chance to win when everyone's healthy. But if you watch Jameis practice throughout the week, and you have to be honest, right? You have to be honest with yourself, and you have to be honest with what you're seeing from a guy. And if his back and the injury he's dealing with is preventing him from playing at the level you need him to play, then you have to seriously consider sitting him down, not taking his job away, but you have to seriously consider giving him a week off to try to get right. Because, if you had a bye coming in week 6 like you did last year, fine. That's not the case this year. So that's just something you have to consider, because I think that while this loss did not do a ton of damage to you in the NFC South race, right? All you have to do is win at Raymond James Stadium, which has been just, let's say it, easy the last 2 years to even that tiebreaker. A loss to the Panthers next week would feel really damaging to that goal.
Yeah, the thing I wonder though is, are they afraid to sit Jameis to damage his ego, or his perception about the leader of this team? Because I was wondering, even this game, Jeff, like towards the end of the game, what was the point of having Winston still in and not putting Dalton in when you knew your quarterback was banged up and hurting?
I mean, you're putting faith in your quarterback, and you are, Dennis said that, he talked to Jameis and they both agreed that he was in the best position to go in there and win the game. And at a certain point, you have to be, okay, Jameis, this is not true, right? There's something going on and you need time. But again, to be fair, he was dealing with this injury against the Falcons, right? That's when it happened. He did not fracture his back after the Falcons game. It happened during the Falcons game, and he went in and led that comeback, that spectacular comeback. So to some extent, you believe that's like, you're right, you can play with this injury, but is it the best option? And that's the question you have to decide throughout the week. Because the fact is, you brought in Andy Dalton for a reason. You did not bring in this high-priced backup because you're afraid to use him. So it's just something you got to consider, and it can't be an ego thing. And if it's an ego thing, that's a problem. Because this is just the reality of what gives you the best chance to win in week 3. Not to win the rest of the season, not to say this is a starter now, but it's just something you have to, if you're as a head coach of an NFL team, you have to be able to make that decision. And if you can't make it because you don't feel comfortable with whatever ego issue is going to be there, then that's a bigger issue that you have to figure out. But anyway, Nick Chason, what's crazy is the Saints have virtually lost any home field advantage the last couple of years. It's like we were a better road team.
It's crazy.
We talked about this already. There's no other way to put it. This team does not win. This home field advantage is not a factor at this point, and hopefully that changes.
They lost 5 of their last 6 home games. That's
badly.
Wild.
Yeah. It's a shame, and it's frustrating because the atmosphere, I don't think, has changed, right? It's not about the fans. It's not about the noise level. It's about the performance of the team. And, it's just got to be better.
Yeah, we need some better home cooking. I don't know.
Well, the food could be better. I've always, I've said for a while, the food at the Superdome needs to be better, and they're working on that. That's what part of this renovation is, working on that. But anyway, Terry McCain, Tampa were the division winners. Y'all act like we lost to Jacksonville. No, I mean, right. This is true. You lost to a very good team, so keep that in mind. This is not the end of the world, but you need to fix the errors that you saw. And if you continue to see the same issues, if you continue to see your veteran running back putting the ball on the ground, stuff like that, if you continue to see Jameis overthrowing Chris Olave when he's wide open down the field, these are issues that you need to correct. And if you can, great. If you can't, then these issues are problems, right? Because I think those are two different things.
I think that one of the biggest concerns, though, too, is the fact that this Tampa team was not at full strength, especially on the offensive side. The O-line came in banged up, even lost some more guys in the game. And then their wide receivers, Tom Brady didn't have his full array of guys even available at his disposal.
That's a good point. You didn't have to deal with Chris Godwin. You didn't have to deal with Julio Jones. Yeah. Although, but the defense is not the problem, in my opinion. So, all right. We got Tim, who's thank you for the donation. We need Dwayne Washington to be starting at least 7 touches. He ran over Devin White. That's enough for me. I really like Dwayne. I think that Dwayne has not gotten the opportunity that he probably earned in the preseason because he got hurt. I don't think he needs to be starting because I think that Alvin Kamara is going to be starting. And I don't think you have any question about Alvin Kamara's talent level. But I think that you do need to give some serious consideration to that RB2 spot. If, Mark Ingram is suddenly a turnover-prone guy, and Dwayne Washington, he ran with pop. He ran with power. He can catch. I've seen it, and, maybe that becomes more of a timeshare in that RB2 spot, and you give Dwayne some more opportunities because I think he earned it.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting going forward just because I don't know if the confidence of Mark Ingram has gone down at all, but you got to imagine that the team's confidence or Pete Carmichael's confidence in giving him the rock is going to be a little iffy going forward because it's been 2 straight games now. And like you just mentioned before, too, that could have cost them the game in Atlanta. They were fortunate it didn't. And it was definitely a big turning point in this matchup against the Buccaneers.
Yeah. And you got to get that stuff sorted out. Let's see a few more questions here. 504 and company. PJ should never be allowed to play corner again. And, he doesn't. There's a reason you moved him from corner, right? I don't think that he is a good cover corner. And,
he totally lost that ball.
Yeah, that's just not what he does well. And he's in his position where I think it was Brashard Perriman, and that's tough. I thought Justin Evans struggled too. I thought that kind of rotation where you end up in coverage had a rough day. And hopefully they can rebound. But yeah, that's not a situation you want to see is PJ Williams one-on-one downfield because he was in position. That's the weird thing is he was in position. And all he had to do was locate the ball. And if he locates the ball and goes and gets it, you might see an interception there. If that's a different guy in that position, you might see an interception. That's just not where PJ thrives. And the Bucs took advantage of it, right? It was a great throw. It was a great catch. But yeah, I think PJ is not a guy you want one-on-one downfield. And that's why he's a safety. Now,
I've been a PJ fan and I have defended him in the past to fans before, and today did not make things any easier, though.
Well, I mean, that's just not what you're setting up a guy to fail if you put him in that situation, right? And that's where there are ways you can avoid having PJ be one-on-one with a fast guy who can go up and get the ball, and that was just a situation where you weren't able to do it. And, you are playing one cornerback down with Paulson Adebo. I think that was after Marshawn got ejected.
The touchdown?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
It must have been, right? Let
me double check here.
I have to check too. I don't want to say something that's wrong.
Yeah, because the happened in the fourth quarter.
Yeah. So Lattimore got ejected with 12:55 to go, and then
the touchdown was at 7:41.
Was with 7:49 left. Yeah. So that was after the ejection. So you were playing 2 cornerbacks down, and PJ got into a matchup that you probably would not have had him in without that scenario unfolding. So I'm not going to hold it against PJ. He did his best. But yeah, it's not you're right. You don't want to see him at outside corner, and that's why. Okay, a few more questions. Okay, well, this isn't really a question. Move Taysom Hill to QB3 and start Dalton, and then you can bring in that other tight end. I disagree, but I do think that I would have liked to see more Taysom Hill in some way, right? The offense was not working, and I don't think you need to say he's a quarterback now, right? But you have him in the offense for a reason, and I don't think that he was used enough. And I say that largely because we've seen him have success against the Bucs before, not as the starting quarterback. And I just don't think that you were creative enough in finding ways to get him the ball. And so that's what I want. I'd like to see that change because he is a weapon. And especially in a game where you didn't have Alvin Kamara, I feel like you needed to be able to use him more than you did.
Yeah, I thought for sure, especially with Kamara down, that Taysom Hill was in store for a big game today. And, the limited times that he did touch the ball, they were successful with him. And I thought even in the game against Atlanta, they kind of went away from him too early and didn't get back to, feeding Taysom the rock more.
There's no saint. I am starting to wonder if we are missing Sean on the offensive play calling. I mean, yeah, of course you're missing Sean. I mean, there's no question that you are missing Sean Payton, right? The question is whether it's a big enough issue that it's costing you games. And I'm not ready to make that assessment yet. But there's no question that his offense has not looked good outside of the fourth quarter against Atlanta, right? So
they did run for 100 yards today. I'll give them that against the tough Buccaneers D.
They ran the ball well without Alvin Kamara. So yeah, you have to give them that. But from an execution standpoint, I think the issue is not as much the play calling. I think the issue is execution because you had open receivers. Like you had deep shots open to Chris Olave.
For sure.
You had opportunities. You had the ball in the red zone that you fumbled, right? These are not play calling issues. This is execution. And that's
right. If some of those connect with Olave, obviously there's a totally different perception about this offense being, stagnant or not creative enough.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm not ready to say this is an issue of not having Sean Payton. This is an issue of Pete Carmichael. He's not putting them in the right situations. I'm not ready to go there yet because I think that you have seen a lot. Like in week 1, there was issues with the backs picking up the blitz. There was issues with offensive line assignments. There was issues with receivers not running the right routes downfield. And so you have to kind of weigh that against, you can call the perfect play. If the players don't run it the right way, it's not going to work. And if your veteran running back, your security blanket running back is fumbling in the red zone, yeah, you could call the best play in the world. It's still going to be a fumble in the red zone. So, if you call the perfect play downfield and Jameis hits Chris Olave for 51 yards and then he falls to the ground and drops it, that's not on the play call. So, I think that there's probably, I think you are definitely missing Sean to some extent. I'm just not sure what the extent is right now. And I still have faith in Pete Carmichael to figure that out. But what we have seen over the first 2 weeks has not been, it's not been a ringing endorsement. So, yeah.
I think Sean's reaction might have been a little more intense, obviously, when that fight broke out between the teams.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's on Mike Evans. Gosh, I don't like that guy. Like, I'm not even saying this from a Saints fan perspective because I didn't grow up a Saints fan. I cover the games. I care a lot about the games, but I'm not like emotionally invested in what happens here. I'm emotionally invested in the Giants and they're 2-0. Yippee, But I haven't even watched. I didn't get to watch that game today. But like, Mike Evans is a punk. Straight up. He's a punk. And I don't know, like, I don't know how else to say it. Like, he's a punk. You lose, like you are getting beat, right? You are not winning. You are getting put in jail by a guy. And instead, your reaction is not, okay, I'm going to beat him. It's, I'm going to take a cheap shot.
Yeah.
Again. And like that's just punk behavior, you know? And like, I get it. He's taller than me. He could beat me up. I don't care. He's a punk. Like, he could run over from the side of the other side of the road and punch me in the face, and he'd probably win that fight because he's gigantic and stronger than me. But that would be a punk move too. But then that's exactly what he did against Marshawn Lattimore. And I don't know. It's like, play football, dude. Play football. Like, don't lose at football and get mad about it.
Sadly, the result was a huge positive for the Buccaneers, though, too, because obviously it takes Lattimore out the game and the best corner on the field.
But that's why it was a good result, because he can't beat Marshawn.
Right, no, exactly.
So going 1-for-1 and losing Mike Evans and Marshawn Lattimore, that means that the Saints are at a huge disadvantage because Marshawn Lattimore is way more important than Mike Evans. Right? And so that's all you need to know about Mike Evans, that him just falling on his sword is an advantage for that team. Like, what I don't know. Like, I don't even care that much, but just that guy, get out of here. I'm done with it.
No, the rematch in December will be, interesting again for sure, because, these two have had a history and it's just going to get even more intense now.
Murtis. She's funny. Have another drink. Okay, well,
sip it up.
All right. Anything else you want to talk about, Steve, before we knock this down?
No, I'm just anxious to see this team get on the field again, obviously, and to get the stench out of this game out their system, because I was sick all last week, but watching this game made me even more ill.
Yeah, it was painful. Yeah, hopefully no one sends that clip to Mike Evans. He's gonna get mad at me. But
come at us, Mike.
Come at me. I know you're not gonna come straight up. You're gonna run from across the street. But yeah, so we can wrap it up there and we can move on to next week. I hope this has been a good, like, cathartic event for everybody. Get it out of your system. It was a rough game. Thank you, Tim. Tim is a fan of my angry Mike Evans rant, and I'm a fan of you. Thank you. But yeah, so we're gonna get back into this. We'll have availability tomorrow. I'm sure we'll hear a lot more from DA, and we're gonna hear about all of the things that were messed up in this game, because I think there's gonna be a lot of them. Steve is gonna be back with us. I don't know if are you gonna be back tomorrow, Steve, or are you gonna have to wait till next week?
I'll be back.
He'll be back, and they're on the road in week 3, right? Or they're in Carolina.
In Carolina, and then from Carolina, it's straight to London.
And then straight to London. It's going to be a busy few weeks.
Don't even come home from that trip.
Whew. Yeah. So we're gonna have a busy time. So we're gonna have to edit this podcast and get it out, and we're gonna do that. But this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate everyone hanging out, everyone who dropped in a comment. Make sure if you are not subscribed, make sure to go subscribe. Give us a review, give us a rating. I like to hear from everybody. I like to know what you like, what you don't. Whether it's, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, which Overcast is our number 2 podcast distributor, which I was surprised by. I expect it to be Spotify. It is actually Overcast. So all of you Overcasters, appreciate you. And we're going to keep this coming at you. The next one will probably be Wednesday. I think the thing that makes sense is doing a Wednesday and a Thursday, but we'll figure it out, and we'll get back to you. So thanks everyone for listening. It's been Inside Black and Gold, and Steve, hit him with a goodbye.
1-1 ain't no fun, but we're going to get back in the saddle this week, folks. Inside Black and Gold coming at you. We'll be breaking down Saints and Panthers pretty soon.
Beautiful. Peace, y'all.
Peace.